Hello there, and welcome back to Sleepy Tin Foil Hat. Tonight, we are going to drift into one of the strangest and most mysterious texts ever written, a book that was once whispered about in temples, copied by hand in hidden monasteries, and debated for centuries by scholars who could never fully agree on what it really meant. This is the story of ancient watchers, of forbidden knowledge, of strange journeys beyond the sky, and of visions that seem to describe a universe far more complex than the one most people imagine. The text we are exploring tonight has been called Lost Scripture, Forbidden History, and even a record of things humanity was never meant to understand. Whether it was written as prophecy, metaphor, or memory, no one can say for sure. But what makes it so fascinating is that it feels like it comes from a place just outside ordinary history, as if someone long ago tried to describe something too vast to explain clearly. So tonight, we are going to move slowly through its secrets, piece by piece, letting the strange ideas settle gently, the way old stories often do when you hear them late at night. If you enjoy these quiet journeys into forgotten knowledge, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where in the world you are listening from tonight. I always like to imagine these stories traveling through the dark, reaching people in different cities, different countries, different time zones, all of us listening at the same moment while the rest of the world sleeps. But for now, there is nothing you need to do except get comfortable. Let your breathing slow down and allow your thoughts to drift as we step back into a time when the world was still mysterious, when the sky felt closer to the earth, and when people believed that hidden beings walked quietly among them. Long before the modern Bible was assembled, before official lists of accepted books were agreed upon, there were many writings that circulated among early communities. Some of them were eventually included in Scripture, and others were left out, not always because they were false, but sometimes because they were difficult, confusing, or simply too strange. Among these forgotten texts, one of the most unusual was the Book of Enoch, a collection of writings attributed to a figure who appears only briefly in the familiar biblical story, yet somehow became the center of one of the most elaborate and mysterious traditions ever recorded. Enoch himself is mentioned only a few times in ancient scripture, described as a man who lived before the great flood, a man who walked with God, and then was taken, without dying, into the heavens. That single line, short and almost casual, was enough to inspire centuries of speculation. People wondered what it meant to walk with God. They wondered what it meant to be taken. And most of all, they wondered what Enoch might have seen, if he truly had been carried beyond the world of ordinary human experience. The Book of Enoch claims to answer those questions, but instead of giving simple explanations, it opens the door to a world filled with strange beings, towering watchers who descended from the sky, teachings about the structure of the heavens, descriptions of journeys through different layers of reality, and warnings about knowledge that was never meant for humans to possess. Reading it feels less like reading history, and more like listening to someone describe a dream so vivid that it almost feels real. One of the reasons the book became so controversial is that it tells a story very different from the one most people are used to hearing. In this version, the world before the flood was not just a place of ordinary people living ordinary lives. It was a world where the boundary between heaven and earth was thinner, where powerful beings could cross over, and where humans were taught things that changed the course of history forever. According to the text, there were beings known as the Watchers, described as heavenly figures, who were meant to observe the world, not interfere with it. Their role was to watch, to record, and to remain separate from humanity. But something went wrong. Instead of remaining distant, some of them became curious about the human world. They looked down and saw people living, struggling, learning, and growing, and they began to wonder what it would be like to step into that world themselves. The story says that a group of these watchers made a decision that would change everything. They chose to descend to Earth, not as invisible spirits, but as physical beings who could walk among humans. And once they were here, they did something even more forbidden. They began to teach. They taught knowledge that humans were never supposed to have. Secrets about the stars, about the movement of the heavens, about metals, weapons, medicine, and things that could change the balance of power in the world. In the Book of Enoch, this moment is described almost like the beginning of a different kind of history, the point where humanity stopped being innocent and started to understand forces that were far beyond its ability to control. Some of the teachings were useful, at least at first. People learned how to make tools, how to build, how to understand the sky. But the book says that knowledge is never neutral. Once it exists, it changes the world. And the more people learned, the more the world began to shift in ways that no one had expected. The story becomes even stranger when it describes what happened next, because the Watchers did not only teach, they also stayed. They lived among humans, and according to the text, they formed bonds that were never supposed to happen. The result was the birth of beings described as giants, powerful and enormous, creatures who were neither fully human nor fully divine. These giants are said to have grown beyond control, consuming more and more, fighting among themselves, and bringing chaos to the world. The earth, in the language of the text, became filled with violence, with noise, with suffering that reached all the way to heaven itself. And this is the moment when the story says that the higher powers finally intervened. Enoch, the man who walked with God, was chosen to witness what had happened and to carry messages between the worlds. In the book, he is taken on journeys through the heavens, shown places where the stars move in perfect order, places where time flows differently, and places where the Watchers who broke the rules were bound and held, waiting for a judgment that had not yet come. What makes these passages so strange is the way they describe the universe. Instead of a simple sky above the earth, the Book of Enoch speaks of layers, of gates, of paths where the sun and moon travel, of storehouses of wind, of places where the ends of the world can be seen. It feels less like poetry and more like someone trying to explain a system that is too large to understand all at once. Some readers believe these descriptions were symbolic, a way of talking about spiritual ideas using the language of the time. Others believe they were attempts to describe real experiences, visions that felt so real that the only way to write them down was to describe them exactly as they appeared, even if they sounded impossible. As the story continues, Enoch is shown the fate of the Watchers who came to Earth. They are not destroyed, at least not immediately. Instead, they are bound, held in a place between worlds, waiting for a final judgment that will come at the end of time. The book describes this waiting as long, silent, and heavy, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. There is something strangely calm about these parts of the text. Even though the story is filled with powerful beings and cosmic events, the tone often feels slow, almost quiet, like someone describing something they saw long ago, something they still do not fully understand. And that is part of what makes the Book of Enoch so fascinating. It does not read like a simple warning or a simple story. It reads like a memory of something that feels just out of reach, something that hints that the world might be far more complicated than it looks when we go about our normal lives. Tonight, we are only at the beginning of that journey. There are still many visions to explore, many strange places described in the text, and many secrets that the book claims were shown to Enoch during his travels beyond the world of ordinary human experience. But for now, let your mind settle into the rhythm of the story, the way old words seem to slow time when you listen to them carefully, and the way the idea of hidden knowledge has always had a strange, calming pull, like watching distant stars that never seem to move, yet somehow carry stories older than anything we know. As the story continues, the journeys of Enoch become even more unusual because the book no longer speaks only about the earth and the events happening among humans. Instead, it begins to describe places that seem to exist beyond the normal world, regions that are not meant to be reached by ordinary people. The writing moves slowly, almost like someone carefully choosing each word, trying to describe things that do not easily fit into human language. Enoch says that he was taken upward, not in the way a bird flies, and not in the way a person climbs, but in a way that felt more like being carried through layers of reality, as if the world itself had many levels stacked one above another. In these visions, the sky is not empty. It is not just a blue space with clouds drifting across it. Instead, it is described as a structured place, filled with paths, gates, and boundaries, each one leading to another region that has its own purpose. Enoch writes about doors in the heavens, openings where the sun rises and sets, and places where the winds are kept, as if the forces of nature are stored somewhere before they are released into the world. The language feels almost mechanical at times, as if the universe is being described not as chaos, but as something carefully arranged, something that follows rules, even when humans cannot see them. One of the most curious parts of these visions is the way time seems to behave differently. Enoch speaks as if moments can stretch, as if a single journey can feel both long and short at the same time. He describes watching the movement of the stars and realizing that they follow patterns so precise that they must have been set in place long before humans ever existed. The book says that the stars do not wander randomly. They move along paths that were assigned to them, and each one has a time when it appears and a time when it disappears, like a clock that has been running since the beginning of the world. As Enoch is shown these things, he begins to understand that the Watchers who came to Earth were not only breaking a rule about interfering with humans, they were also stepping outside the order that held the universe together. The book suggests that everything has a place, everything has a role, and when something leaves the place it was meant to stay, the balance begins to shift in ways that cannot easily be fixed. He is then taken to a place that the text describes as the ends of the earth, though it does not sound like the end of a flat world. Instead, it feels more like the edge of what humans are allowed to see. There, Enoch describes mountains made of strange materials, shining in ways that do not look like ordinary stone. Some are said to glow softly, others to reflect light as if they are made from metal or crystal. He writes that these mountains stand in silence, unmoving, as if they have been there longer than the earth itself. Nearby, he sees deep valleys where darkness seems thicker than normal shadow, places where the light does not reach easily. The book says these are places prepared for those who broke the laws of heaven, places where the Watchers who descended to earth would remain until the final judgment. The description is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet, almost cold, as if the punishment is not fire or noise, but waiting. Waiting in a place where time moves slowly, where nothing changes, where the memory of what happened is the only thing that remains. As the journey continues, Enoch is shown the storehouses of the winds. This part of the text has always puzzled readers because it speaks about the wind as if it is something that can be kept, something that can be released at the right moment. He describes great openings in the earth and in the sky, places where the winds come from when they are sent out across the world. Some bring rain, some bring cold, some bring heat, and each one has its own path to follow. The way the book explains these things makes it sound as if the natural world is not random at all. Instead, it feels like everything is part of a system that was designed to keep the world in balance. When the winds blow too strongly, when the seasons change in strange ways, when the earth feels unstable, the text hints that it may be because the balance has been disturbed somewhere beyond human sight. Enoch is then taken higher, to a place where he can see the paths of the sun and the moon. The description here becomes very detailed, almost like a lesson being given. He writes about gates in the east and gates in the west, openings where the sun enters and leaves the sky. He says there are different gates for different times of the year, and that the sun does not always rise in the same place, but moves slowly along a path that repeats again and again. To modern readers, this sounds like an attempt to explain the changing seasons, the shifting position of the sunrise, the cycle that repeats every year. But in the book, it is described as if these movements are controlled from somewhere above, as if there are forces making sure the sun never loses its way. The moon is described in a similar way, with phases that follow a pattern, growing and shrinking in a rhythm that never breaks. Enoch writes that these patterns were shown to him so that humans would understand that the universe is not drifting aimlessly. It is moving according to rules that were set long ago, rules that even the watchers were not allowed to change. As he watches these movements, Enoch begins to realize that the knowledge given to humans by the watchers was dangerous, not because knowledge itself is evil, but because it was incomplete. The watchers taught humans how to use things, but they did not teach them how those things fit into the larger order. And when knowledge is used without understanding the balance around it, the result is chaos. The book says that this is what happened before the flood. Humans learned too much too quickly, and they used that knowledge without wisdom. Weapons were made, power grew, the giants born from the union of watchers and humans became stronger than anyone could control. The earth filled with violence, not because it was meant to, but because the balance had been broken. Enoch is then shown a vision of the earth itself, as if he is looking down from far above. He sees the oceans, the mountains, the deserts, and the cities of people living their lives, unaware of the forces moving around them. The text says that from this height, human struggles look small, but they still matter, because every action adds weight to the balance of the world. There is a strange calmness in this part of the story. Instead of anger or fear, the tone feels almost patient, as if the universe is watching and waiting, allowing things to happen until the moment comes when they must be corrected. Finally, Enoch is brought to a place where he is told that he will return to the earth, but he will not be the same. He has seen too much, learned too much, and from that moment on, his role will be different from other humans. He will become a messenger, someone who carries warnings, someone who tells people that the world is not as simple as it seems. The book says that most people did not understand his words. Some were afraid of them. Some ignored them completely. But the message remained, written down, copied, passed from one generation to another, until it became the strange and mysterious text we are listening to tonight. And this is only the beginning of the visions, because the Book of Enoch goes even deeper, describing future events, hidden judgments, and prophecies about the end of the age, things that feel less like history and more like glimpses of something that has not happened yet. Let the story settle for a moment, the way old stories often do, slowly, quietly, as if they are meant to be heard in the dark when the world is still. The visions shown to Enoch do not end with the movements of the sun and the moon, or with the places where the winds and stars are kept. The book continues as if the journey is moving deeper, not only upward into the heavens, but also forward into time itself. The writing begins to feel different here, slower and more reflective, as if what Enoch is being shown is harder to describe than anything he has seen before. Instead of mountains and gates and shining paths, he is shown events that have not yet happened, and he is told that the future is not fixed in the way humans imagine, but it follows patterns just like the stars do. In these passages, Enoch speaks about the idea that history moves in cycles, not the same events repeating exactly, but the same kinds of mistakes, the same kinds of choices, appearing again and again across generations. He is told that before the Great Flood, the world had already begun to lose its balance, not because of one single action, but because of many small changes that slowly pushed everything out of place. Knowledge was given without wisdom. Power was taken without understanding. And little by little, the world became louder, more violent, more restless. The book describes this restlessness in a strange way. It says the earth itself began to cry out, as if the world could feel what was happening on its surface. The language is symbolic, but the feeling behind it is clear. When the balance of the world is disturbed, the disturbance does not stay in one place. It spreads. It moves through nature, through people, through the sky itself, until everything feels slightly wrong, even if no one can explain why. Enoch is then shown what the text calls the place of judgment, though it does not look like the kind of judgment people usually imagine. There is no throne of fire, no sudden punishment, no loud declaration. Instead, he sees a vast open space, quiet and still, where beings stand in silence, waiting. Some are described as the watchers who descended to earth long ago, the same ones who taught forbidden knowledge and changed the course of history. They are not moving, they are not speaking, they are simply there, held in a state that feels like time has stopped for them. The book says they are waiting for a moment that has not yet come, a moment when everything will be set right again. The idea of waiting appears many times in the Book of Enoch, and it gives the story a strange calm feeling, as if the universe does not rush. It moves slowly, carefully, allowing events to unfold until the right moment arrives. After this, Enoch is shown something even more unusual. He is shown what the text calls the books of heaven. These are not books made of paper or stone, but records, as if every action, every choice, every moment that happens in the world is somehow remembered. The writing says that nothing is truly lost, nothing disappears completely, because everything becomes part of the record. The idea is not explained in detail, but the feeling is clear. The universe is not forgetful. It holds on to what happens, the same way the stars hold their paths, the same way the seasons return again and again. For Enoch, seeing this is not frightening. It is quiet, almost peaceful, as if understanding that everything is recorded also means that nothing is meaningless. He is then told that humans often believe they are living in the only time that matters, but the truth is that the world has passed through many ages and will pass through many more. Some ages are calm, some are full of confusion, some are filled with knowledge, others are filled with forgetting. The Book of Enoch suggests that the time before the flood was one of those moments when knowledge and power grew faster than wisdom, and the result was a world that could not hold itself together anymore. As the vision continues, Enoch sees scenes that feel like fragments of different futures. He sees people building cities, people fighting, people searching for meaning, people looking up at the sky the same way they always have, wondering if someone is watching. The book does not give exact dates or names. Instead, it shows patterns, as if history is like a long story with repeating themes. One of the most mysterious parts of this section is when Enoch is shown what the text calls the generations of the world. Instead of describing them as separate groups of people, the book speaks about them as if they are chapters in a larger story. Each generation begins with hope, grows stronger, becomes more confident, and then slowly forgets the limits it once respected. The forgetting is important. Over and over, the book suggests that the greatest danger is not evil in the way people usually think of it, but forgetting the balance that holds everything together. When people forget where knowledge comes from, when they forget that power has consequences, when they forget that the world is part of something larger, the same pattern begins again. Enoch is told that this pattern cannot be stopped completely, but it can be understood. and understanding it is the only way to keep the world from falling into chaos again. This is why, according to the book, he was shown these visions, not so he could change the future, but so he could warn those who were willing to listen. The tone of the writing becomes softer here, almost like someone speaking quietly at the end of a long story. Enoch says that after seeing these things, he felt both heavy and calm at the same time. Heavy, because he understood how easily the world can lose its balance. Calm, because he also understood that the universe itself does not panic. It continues moving, following its order, even when humans do not see it. He then describes being taken once more to the high places, where he could see the stars moving in their paths again. The same stars he saw before, the same patterns, the same steady motion. And he realizes that while people change, while generations come and go, the larger order remains. The Book of Enoch returns to this idea again and again. The heavens move in order. The earth follows its cycles. The winds come and go at the right time. The sun rises where it is supposed to rise. The moon follows its rhythm. Everything continues, even when the world below feels uncertain. This is meant to be comforting, not frightening. The text suggests that the universe is not fragile. It does not fall apart easily. But when humans forget the order they are part of, life begins to feel chaotic, even if the larger structure is still there. At the end of this vision, Enoch is told that he will return once more to the world of people, but he will carry the memory of what he has seen. He will know that the sky is not empty. He will know that history is not random. He will know that there are forces beyond human sight, not always interfering, not always speaking, but always there. And with that knowledge, he is sent back, not as a king, not as a warrior, but as a witness. Someone who saw the hidden parts of the story and tried to describe them the best he could. The book continues after this, going even further into prophecy, into symbols, into strange visions of the end of the age and the beginning of another one. Visions that feel less like history and more like dreams that carry meaning even when they are hard to understand. For now, let the images rest in your mind. The quiet gates of heaven, the slow paths of the stars, the waiting figures in the silent places, and the feeling that the world may be part of something far older and far more ordered than it appears when we look at it during the day. As the visions continue, the Book of Enoch begins to shift into a part that feels less like a journey through places and more like a journey through symbols. The writing becomes more dreamlike, as if the things Enoch is being shown are not meant to be understood in a simple way. Instead of describing mountains, gates, and stars directly, the text begins to speak in images that seem to stand for something else, something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of the story. Enoch says that he was shown the history of the world again, but this time not as a list of events. Instead, it appeared to him as a series of visions filled with animals, strange landscapes, and movements that felt familiar, even though they were not explained. In the book, people are sometimes shown as animals, not because they are being insulted, but because the vision is trying to show their nature rather than their appearance. He describes seeing sheep, bulls, birds, and wild beasts moving across the earth, each one behaving in ways that seem to represent different kinds of people and different kinds of ages. Some animals are calm and peaceful, staying together and following a path. Others are restless, fighting, wandering, or turning against one another. The meaning is not given directly, but the feeling is clear. The world passes through times of order and times of confusion, and the vision shows those changes in a way that words alone cannot. In one part of the vision, Enoch sees a group of bright beings watching over the earth from above, the same watchers he saw before, but this time they are not descending. They are observing, as if their role is to see what happens without interfering. The book suggests that the world is always being watched, not in a threatening way, but in the sense that nothing truly happens without being noticed somewhere beyond human sight. Then the vision changes, and he sees the moment when the Watchers first came down to the earth. The animals in the vision become restless. The peaceful ones begin to act differently. The wild ones grow stronger. The balance that existed before begins to break apart. Not all at once, but slowly, the way something heavy shifts before it finally falls. The text says that the Watchers taught the people many things, just as in the earlier parts of the book. But in this vision, the teaching is shown as tools being given to the animals, tools they were not ready to use. Some used them wisely, but many did not. And as the tools spread, the world in the vision becomes louder, more violent, more crowded, as if knowledge itself has weight, and too much of it can make the world unstable. Enoch watches as the vision moves forward to the time of the great flood. The animals scatter, the earth shakes, water rises. The noise of the world becomes so great that it feels like it cannot continue the way it was. In the book, the flood is not described only as punishment, but as a kind of reset, a moment when the world is forced to become quiet again so that balance can return. After the flood, the vision becomes calmer. The animals begin again, slowly, carefully, as if the story of the world is starting over. But the book makes it clear that even though the world begins again, the memory of what happened before never completely disappears. The knowledge that was once given still exists somewhere, and the possibility of losing balance again is always there. As the vision continues, Enoch sees different generations rising and falling. Some live in peace for a time, others become proud, others forget the warnings that were given long ago. The book does not describe these generations with names the way history books do. Instead, it shows them as movements in the vision, waves that rise and fall across the earth. At one point, Enoch says he saw a great building being made, a structure that stood in the middle of the world, shining and strong. Many gathered around it, and for a time, everything felt ordered again. But the vision does not stay there. The building changes. People argue. The order weakens. And once again, the world begins to drift away from the balance it once had. The strange thing about this part of the Book of Enoch is that it does not feel angry. It does not speak as if the world is doomed forever. Instead, it feels patient, as if these cycles are part of the way history moves, the same way the seasons move, the same way the stars follow their paths without ever stopping. Enoch is then shown something that the text describes as the final age, though it is not clear exactly when this age is meant to happen. In the vision, the world becomes quiet again, but not in the way it was after the flood. This quiet feels different, calmer, more complete, as if the long story of mistakes and corrections has finally reached a point where it no longer needs to repeat itself. He sees the animals at peace, the Watchers no longer descending, the sky moving in its perfect order again. The book says that in this age, knowledge and wisdom are no longer separated. People understand the balance they are part of, and because of that, the world no longer falls into the same chaos it did before. The writing here becomes very soft, almost like the end of a dream. There are no loud events, no battles, no sudden changes. Just a feeling that the story has reached a place where it can rest. After this vision, Enoch says that he was left alone for a time, thinking about everything he had seen. He understood that the world is much older than any one generation, and that the things people believe are permanent often last only a short time compared to the larger pattern. He also understood that the Watchers, the giants, the flood, the visions of the future, all of them were part of the same story. A story about balance, about knowledge, and about what happens when that balance is forgotten. The Book of Enoch does not say that humans are evil, and it does not say that the world is hopeless. Instead, it says something quieter. It says that the world is always moving, always changing, and that the greatest danger is not the unknown, but the moment when people believe they understand everything and stop paying attention to the order around them. As the vision ends, Enoch is told once again that his role is not to change what will happen, but to remember what he has seen and to tell it to those who are willing to listen, even if many will not understand. The text then moves into another part of the story, one that speaks about the coming of a figure sometimes called the Chosen One, a mysterious presence connected to the final restoration of balance, a part of the book that has puzzled readers for centuries because it feels both familiar and completely different from anything else in ancient writings. Let your mind stay slow and steady as the story continues, the way these old words seem to move at their own pace, never rushing, never forcing, just unfolding one image at a time. As the Book of Enoch moves deeper into its later visions, the tone begins to change again, becoming quieter, more mysterious, and in some ways more difficult to understand. Up to this point, the journey has shown watchers descending from the heavens, the order of the stars, the cycles of the world, and the repeating patterns of history. But now the text begins to speak about something different, something that feels less like a place and more like a presence. Enoch writes that he was shown a figure who did not belong to any one generation, a figure who seemed to exist outside of time itself. The book does not give this figure a simple name at first. Instead, it describes him as the Chosen One, the Righteous One, the one who was hidden, the one who was known before the world began. The language becomes very calm here, almost careful, as if the writer is trying to describe something that cannot be fully explained in ordinary words. Enoch says that this presence was not like the watchers who descended to earth, and not like the humans who lived below. It was something in between, something connected to the order of the universe itself. In the vision, this Chosen One is shown sitting in a place of light, surrounded by silence, as if time moves differently there. He is not ruling in the way kings rule, and he is not fighting in the way warriors fight. Instead, he is waiting for the moment when the balance of the world will need to be restored again. The idea of waiting returns here, just as it did before with the watchers who were bound. But this waiting feels different. It does not feel like punishment. It feels like preparation. Enoch says that he asked the beings who were guiding him who this figure was and why he seemed so important. The answer he received was not simple. He was told that this presence had been known from the beginning, before the stars were placed in their paths, before the earth took its shape, before humans walked on the ground. The book says that the Chosen One was part of the plan of the world itself, even if the world did not yet know it. This part of the text has puzzled readers for centuries, because it sounds like prophecy, but it does not match exactly with the prophecies people expect. It feels older, more symbolic, as if it is speaking about the idea of balance being restored rather than one single event. The Chosen One is described as someone who will bring justice, but not in anger, someone who will set things right, but not through destruction alone. The book suggests that when the world forgets the order it belongs to, there will always come a moment when that order returns. The vision continues, and Enoch is shown what the text calls the place of the righteous. This is not described as a city or a temple, but as a peaceful region where those who lived in balance with the world remain. There is no noise there, no conflict, no fear. The writing says that in this place, time feels gentle, as if nothing is rushing, nothing is being forced. The people there are not worried about the future, because they understand that the world moves in cycles, and that every cycle has its time. Nearby, he is also shown another place, a darker region, where those who broke the balance remain. Just like the watchers who descended from the heavens, these figures are not being punished in loud or violent ways. They are simply separated, waiting, unable to move forward until the moment comes when everything will be judged together. The feeling here is not terror, but heaviness. The kind of heaviness that comes from knowing that something was done out of pride, out of impatience, out of the belief that the rules did not apply anymore. Enoch begins to understand that the story of the Watchers was not only about the past, it was also a warning. The Watchers believed they could step outside the order of the world and still control what happened. They believed knowledge alone was enough. But the book repeats again and again that knowledge without balance leads to chaos, and chaos always leads to correction. He is then shown the earth once more, but this time it looks different. Instead of seeing individual people, he sees the world as a whole, as if he is looking from far above. He sees generations rising and falling, cities appearing and disappearing, people learning, forgetting, learning again. The pattern repeats so many times that it begins to feel like the movement of the ocean, waves coming in, waves going out, never stopping, never staying the same. The beings guiding him tell him that this is the way the world has always been, and the way it will always be, until the final age arrives, the age when the cycle no longer needs to repeat. They say that every generation believes it is the most important one, the one where everything will finally be decided. But the truth is slower than that. The truth moves with the patience of the stars, not the impatience of people. One of the most calming parts of this section of the Book of Enoch is the way it describes the heavens during all of this. While the earth changes, while people struggle, while knowledge grows and fades, the sky continues to move in perfect order. The sun rises through its gates. The moon follows its path. The stars keep their positions. Nothing rushes. Nothing forgets. Enoch says that when he saw this, he understood something that he had not understood before. The world feels chaotic only when you look at it from inside. From above, from the place where the order of the heavens can be seen, everything is still part of the same pattern, even when it does not look that way to those living through it. The vision of the Chosen One appears again near the end of this part of the book. This time, the figure is standing, not sitting, as if the moment of waiting is slowly coming to an end. The book says that when the time is right, the balance of the world will be restored, not by force alone, but by the return of the order that was always meant to exist. Enoch is told that he will not see that final age himself, but he will carry the knowledge of it. He will know that the world is not drifting without direction, even when it feels that way. He will know that the Watchers, the flood, the visions, the cycles of history, all of them are parts of the same long story. And with that understanding, the vision begins to fade, the images becoming softer, the voices quieter, as if the journey is slowly coming back toward the world of ordinary people again. But the Book of Enoch is not finished yet, because the final sections speak about the end of the age itself, about the moment when the cycles finally stop repeating, and the world becomes something new, something the text describes in a way that feels more like a dream than a prediction. Let the story stay slow and steady, the way these ancient words seem to move, as if they were meant to be heard when the mind is calm and the night is quiet. As the Book of Enoch moves toward its final visions, the feeling of the story becomes even more distant and quiet, as if the journey has gone so far beyond the ordinary world that it can only be described in symbols and impressions. The writing no longer speaks only about the past or the present, but about what the text calls the last age, a time when the long pattern of the world finally reaches its turning point. The tone here is not loud or dramatic. It does not rush toward the ending. Instead, it unfolds slowly, the way the sky changes before dawn, almost without being noticed. Enoch says that he was shown the earth again, but this time it looked older, as if many generations had already passed. He saw people living their lives the way people always do, building, arguing, searching, learning, forgetting, and starting again. Nothing looked very different at first. The sun still rose, the moon still moved through its phases, the stars still followed their paths exactly as they had before. But the beings guiding him told him that the difference was not in what could be seen easily. The difference was in the balance of the world itself. The book says that as the ages pass, the world becomes heavier with the weight of everything that has happened in it. Every action, every choice, every moment becomes part of the record that Enoch had seen earlier, the record that nothing escapes. The text describes this weight in a strange way. It says the earth begins to grow tired, not like a living creature, but like something that has carried too much for too long. The seasons continue, but they do not feel the same. The people continue, but they forget more than they remember. Knowledge exists, but wisdom becomes harder to find. The book suggests that the final age begins not with a sudden event, but with a slow change that most people do not even notice. Enoch then sees a vision of the Watchers again, the same Watchers who descended long ago. They are still waiting in the place where they were bound, still silent, still unable to leave. The book says that their waiting is part of the balance of the world, because what was done cannot be undone until the time comes when everything is judged together. The Watchers do not speak, they do not move, they remain exactly as they were, as if time itself has paused for them while the rest of the world continues. After this, Enoch is shown the heavens one more time, but the sky looks different now. The stars are still in their places, but the feeling of the vision is heavier, as if the moment he was told about earlier is getting closer. He sees the gates where the sun enters and leaves, the same gates he saw before, and he realizes that even now, even at the end of the age, the order of the heavens has not changed at all. This is one of the strangest ideas in the Book of Enoch. No matter what happens on earth, the sky remains steady. The movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars never lose their rhythm. The book seems to say that the universe itself does not become chaotic. Only the world of people does. The beings guiding him then show him something he had not seen before, a gathering that feels different from anything earlier in the story. He sees countless figures standing together, not in fear, not in confusion, but in silence, as if they are waiting for something to begin. Some are the righteous, the ones who lived in balance. Some are the ones who lost their way. Some are the Watchers who came down from the heavens. All of them are there at the same time, as if the story of the world has reached a point where nothing more can be added to it. In the middle of this gathering, the presence Enoch saw before appears again, the chosen one, the one who was known from the beginning. This time the description feels stronger, but still calm. The book does not describe thunder or fire. It describes light, clear and steady, the kind of light that makes everything visible without hurting the eyes. Enoch says that when this presence appeared, the silence became deeper, not frightening, but complete, as if the waiting was finally ending. The book explains that this moment is not only about punishment or reward. It is about restoring the balance that was lost long ago, when the Watchers descended, when knowledge was given without wisdom, when the world first began to drift away from the order it was meant to follow. The text says that nothing is forgotten in this moment. Every action, every choice, every generation becomes part of what is seen. The books of heaven that Enoch saw earlier are opened, not as a threat, but as a record, a reminder that everything has meaning, even the things people believed were lost. Some are described as stepping forward into the light, not because they were perfect, but because they lived without forgetting the balance of the world. Others remain behind, not because they were hated, but because they chose to live as if the balance did not matter. The book does not describe this in detail. It leaves the feeling quiet and unfinished, as if the writer wanted the reader to think about it rather than see it clearly. After this, the vision changes one last time. Enoch sees the earth again, but now it looks calm in a way it never did before. The noise is gone. The restlessness is gone. The cycles that repeated again and again have finally stopped. The book says, "This is the beginning of the new age, the age that was spoken about in the earlier visions, the age where knowledge and wisdom are no longer separated. In this new age, the watchers no longer descend. The earth no longer cries out. The stars continue their paths, but now the world below them moves in the same order. The text does not describe cities or kings or battles. It describes peace, not as excitement, but as stillness, the kind of stillness that feels natural, like the moment just before sleep." Enoch says that when he saw this, he understood that the story of the world is not only about what happens, but about how the balance returns again and again until the moment comes when it no longer needs to return. After this final vision, he is brought back once more, away from the heavens, away from the gates, away from the silent places where the watchers wait. He finds himself once again in the world of people, the same world he left, but now he carries the memory of everything he saw. The Book of Enoch says that he wrote these things down so that those who came after him would remember that the world is larger than it appears, older than it seems, and more ordered than people often believe when they are caught in the middle of their own time. The writing becomes softer here, as if the journey itself is coming to rest, like a long story told late at night, when the words begin to slow and the mind begins to drift. But there is still one last part of the book, a final reflection, where Enoch speaks not about visions, but about what it means to live in a world that is always changing, always moving, always part of something greater than anyone can fully understand. Let the story stay calm as we move toward the final part of the journey. In the last part of the Book of Enoch, the visions grow quieter, as if the journey has reached a place where there is nothing left to reveal through images alone. Instead of mountains, gates, watchers, and shining paths in the heavens, the writing turns inward, speaking more about understanding than about what was seen. Enoch no longer describes being carried from place to place. He describes what it feels like to return, to walk again among ordinary people while holding the memory of something far beyond ordinary life. He says that after the final vision faded, he found himself back on the earth, standing under the same sky he had always known. The sun still rose. The wind still moved across the ground. People were still living their lives, speaking, working, worrying about things that felt important to them. Nothing looked different, yet everything felt different to him, because he knew how much of the world could not be seen. The book says that this is one of the hardest things to carry, the knowledge that the world is larger than it appears, while everyone around you believes what they see is all that exists. Enoch does not describe this as loneliness exactly, but there is a quiet feeling in these passages, the feeling of someone who understands that most people are not meant to see what he saw. He writes that the heavens still move in their perfect order, even when no one looks at them. The stars keep their paths, whether people understand them or not. The winds come from the places prepared for them, the same way they always have. The balance of the world continues, even when humans forget that it is there. The book begins to speak about wisdom in a different way now. Earlier, knowledge was described as something dangerous when it was given without understanding. Now wisdom is described as something quiet, something that does not need to be forced. Enoch says that wisdom does not come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing that there are things too large to control, things too old to change, things that must be respected even when they cannot be explained. He tells the people around him that the world has passed through many ages before, and it will pass through many more. Some people listen, some do not. Some are curious, some are afraid. The book says, this is the way it has always been. Not everyone is meant to understand the same things at the same time. There is a passage where Enoch speaks about the Watchers again, but now he does not speak about them with fear. He speaks about them as a warning, a reminder of what happens when beings forget their place in the order of the world. The Watchers were powerful. They had knowledge humans did not have. But they believed that power meant they could step outside the balance that held everything together. Because of that, they became part of the story they were supposed to watch from a distance. They changed the world, but they also changed themselves. And in the end, they could not return to what they were before. The book says, this is true for humans as well. Every choice becomes part of the record. Every action becomes part of the balance. Nothing disappears completely, even when it seems forgotten. Enoch then speaks about time again, the same way he saw it in the visions. He says that people think time moves in a straight line, from the past to the future, but the truth feels different when you see it from above. From the place where the stars move, time feels like a circle, or maybe a spiral, repeating patterns, but never exactly the same. Generations rise, learn, forget, and begin again. The world grows quiet, then loud, then quiet again. Knowledge appears, then disappears, then returns in a new form. The book suggests that this is not a mistake. It is part of the way the world moves. There is something calming about this idea. If the world moves in cycles, then no moment lasts forever. Confusion does not last forever. Fear does not last forever. Even the times when everything feels out of balance will pass, the same way they have passed before. Enoch says that the greatest mistake people make is believing that their time is the only time that matters. When you live inside one moment, it feels like everything depends on what happens right now. But when you see the larger pattern, you understand that the world has survived many moments like this, and it will survive many more. The book then returns one last time to the idea of the final age, the age he saw in the last vision. He does not describe it in detail. He only says that it will come when the balance no longer needs to be restored, when the world moves in order without being forced back into it. He says that no one knows when that age will come, and that trying to guess the moment is not the point. The point is to remember that the order exists, even when it cannot be seen. Near the end, the writing becomes very soft, almost like someone speaking quietly so they do not wake anyone. Enoch says that the sky will always remind those who look at it carefully. The sun rises through its gates. The moon follows its path. The stars never lose their places. The heavens do not forget the order they were given. And if the heavens do not forget, then the world below them can always find its way back, even after it has wandered for a long time. He says that this is why the story was written, not to frighten people, not to make them feel small, but to remind them that they are part of something older than their fears and larger than their mistakes. The Book of Enoch ends not with a battle, not with a loud ending, but with a feeling of quiet understanding. The watchers are still waiting. The heavens are still moving. The world is still turning. And the balance, even when it seems lost, is never completely gone. So as the story comes to rest, imagine the sky the way Enoch saw it, wide and steady, the stars moving slowly along their paths, the wind coming from places no one can see, the earth turning the way it always has. And let that feeling stay for a moment, the feeling that the world is older, calmer, and more ordered than it sometimes seems when you are living inside it. The journey continues in the next part, where we will drift even deeper into the hidden meanings behind these ancient writings, and the strange idea that some knowledge was never meant to disappear, only to be forgotten until the right time comes again. As the story continues, the Book of Enoch begins to feel less like a record of visions and more like a quiet reflection on what those visions meant. The journeys through the heavens, the watchers, the cycles of history, and the final age all start to settle into something calmer, almost like the mind trying to understand a dream after waking up. The writing slows down, repeating certain ideas in different ways, as if the message is not meant to be heard once, but many times, until it becomes familiar. Enoch says that after he returned from the visions, he spent a long time simply watching the world, not traveling, not speaking, not trying to convince anyone of what he had seen, just watching. He watched the sun rise and set. He watched the seasons change. He watched people live their lives, making plans, worrying about things that felt urgent to them, even though those same worries had existed in every generation before. He says that when you watch long enough, you begin to notice patterns that most people never see, because they are too busy moving from one moment to the next. The Book of Enoch returns again to the idea that the world moves in rhythms, the same way the heavens move in rhythms. Nothing stays exactly the same, but nothing is completely random either. He remembers what he saw in the visions, the gates of the sun, the paths of the moon, the storehouses of the winds, and the silent places where the watchers remain. And he realizes that those things are not separate from the world people live in every day. They are part of the same order, the same structure, even if most people never think about it. There is a passage where Enoch says that the greatest mistake people make is believing that the world belongs to them. He says, the earth was here long before humans, and it will continue long after any one generation is gone. The Watchers believed they could change the world without understanding the balance that held it together, and that is why their story became a warning that would be told again and again. The book does not say that knowledge itself is wrong. In fact, it repeats that knowledge is part of the order of the world. The stars follow knowledge, the seasons follow knowledge, the paths of the heavens follow knowledge. But the danger comes when knowledge is taken without patience, without respect for the way things are meant to move. Enoch says that wisdom feels different from knowledge. Knowledge makes you feel powerful. Wisdom makes you feel calm. Knowledge makes you want to change things quickly. Wisdom makes you watch and wait until the right moment comes. This idea appears many times in the last parts of the book, as if it is the lesson he was meant to bring back from the visions. He also speaks again about the record he saw in the heavens, the record where every action becomes part of the balance of the world. He says that people often think their actions disappear once they are finished, but nothing truly disappears. Everything becomes part of the pattern, the same way every star becomes part of the sky. This is not meant to frighten anyone. The book does not say the record exists to punish. It says the record exists because the world remembers itself. The order of the universe depends on remembering what has happened, the same way a path exists because it has been walked many times before. Enoch then speaks about the Watchers one last time, but the way he describes them now feels different from earlier parts of the story. At the beginning, the Watchers felt powerful and dangerous, beings who came down from the heavens and changed the world. Now they feel more like a memory, a reminder of what can happen when even powerful beings forget the order they belong to. He says that the Watchers are still waiting, not because the universe is angry, but because the balance must be restored in its own time. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forced. Even the judgment he saw in the visions happens slowly, the way the stars move slowly across the sky. The book then returns to the idea of the final age again, but this time it speaks about it in a softer way. Instead of describing events, it describes a feeling that the world will become quiet again, not empty, but peaceful. A time when people will no longer feel the need to take more than they understand, or to change things faster than they are meant to change. Enoch says that in that age, knowledge and wisdom will no longer be separated. People will still learn, still discover, still look at the sky with curiosity, but they will not forget that they are part of the same order as the stars they are watching. He admits that he does not know when that age will come. He says that even the beings who showed him the visions did not tell him a time. They only told him that the pattern will continue until the balance no longer needs to be corrected. There is something very calming about this part of the Book of Enoch. It does not try to make the future sound frightening. It does not try to make it sound exciting. It simply says that the world moves the way it always has, slowly, patiently, following rules that existed before anyone was here to notice them. Near the end of this section, Enoch writes that sometimes the best way to understand the world is to look at the sky at night, when everything is quiet. The stars move exactly the way they did thousands of years ago. The same patterns appear again and again. Nothing rushes. Nothing forgets where it belongs. He says that when you look at the sky long enough, it becomes easier to believe that the world is not falling apart, even when it feels like it is. It is only moving through another part of the pattern, the same way it always has. And with that thought, the writing becomes slower again, almost like the end of a long conversation spoken in the dark, when the voice grows softer and softer, and the mind begins to drift. There is still more to the story, because the final parts of the Book of Enoch speak about what it means to live in a world that is always changing, and why the old stories were written in the first place, not to predict the future, but to remind people that the balance of the world has always been there, even when it is hard to see. As the Book of Enoch moves closer to its ending, the writing becomes more reflective than ever, as if the purpose of the story is no longer to show visions, but to leave behind a feeling. The earlier parts spoke about watchers descending from the heavens, about gates in the sky, about the paths of the sun and the moon, about the cycles of the world repeating again and again. Now the book speaks more quietly, as if it wants the listener to understand that all those strange visions were not only about the past, and not only about the future, but about the way the world always is, even when no one is paying attention. Enoch says that after everything he had seen, he began to understand why the ancient stories were written in such unusual ways. They were not written only to explain events. They were written so that people would remember that the world is deeper than it looks. When things seem simple, they are often not simple at all. When things seem chaotic, there is often an order hidden underneath, the same kind of order he saw in the movements of the stars. He writes that people in every generation believe they are living in the most confusing time, the most dangerous time, the most important time. But the visions showed him that every age feels that way to the people inside it. The world has always passed through moments when knowledge grows too fast, when power is used without wisdom, when people forget the balance they are part of. And each time, the world slowly corrects itself, sometimes gently, sometimes in ways that feel frightening while they are happening. The book returns again to the story of the Watchers, but now it explains their mistake in a calmer way. They were not evil in the way people usually imagine evil. They were curious. They wanted to understand the world below them. They wanted to share what they knew. But they forgot that knowledge changes the one who receives it, and it also changes the world around it. When they stepped outside the order they were meant to follow, the balance began to shift, not all at once, but little by little, until the world could not hold itself steady anymore. Enoch says that the same thing happens to people, only on a smaller scale. When someone believes they can live without balance, without patience, without respect for the order of the world, life begins to feel unstable. Not because the universe is breaking, but because the person has stepped out of the rhythm that everything else is following. He writes that this is why the heavens were shown to him so many times in the visions. The stars never forget their paths. The sun never rises in the wrong place. The moon never appears at the wrong time. everything moves the way it was meant to move. The sky is a reminder that the world has a structure, even when humans cannot see it clearly. There is a long passage where Enoch speaks about watching the night sky after he returned from the visions. He says that before his journey, he saw the stars the way everyone sees them, as lights in the darkness. But after the visions, he could not look at the sky the same way. He felt as if each star was part of something larger, something steady, something that did not hurry or panic the way people do. He says that this feeling stayed with him, even when he was walking among people again. When others argued, he remembered the silence of the places he had seen. When others worried about the future, he remembered the slow movement of the heavens. When others believed the world was falling apart, he remembered that the world had passed through many ages before. The book then speaks again about the record he saw, the record where nothing is forgotten. He says that people often wish they could erase mistakes, erase moments, erase things they regret. But the world does not work that way. Everything becomes part of the pattern, the same way every step becomes part of a path. This is not meant to make anyone afraid. The book says the record exists so that the balance of the world can be kept. Without memory, there would be no order. Without order, there would be no world at all. Enoch also says that the final age he saw in the visions will not come because someone forces it to come. It will come the way the seasons come, the way the sun returns to the same place in the sky, the way the moon completes its cycle again and again, slowly, patiently, in its own time. He warns that many people will try to predict the moment when the world changes, but the ones who understand the order of the world know that it cannot be rushed. The watchers tried to rush it. That is why their story became a warning. The writing becomes very soft here, almost like someone speaking in a low voice, so the words do not disturb the quiet. Enoch says that the purpose of the story is not to make people afraid of the future. It is to remind them that the world has always been part of something larger, something older, something more patient than any one generation. He says that when you feel lost, it helps to remember the sky. The sky moves the way it always has. The stars keep their places. The winds come from the same unseen places. The earth turns the same way it turned long before anyone was here to notice it. And if the world is still moving in its order, then the balance has not been lost. It is only hidden for a time, the way the stars are hidden during the day, even though they are still there. The Book of Enoch begins to feel like it is coming to rest now, like the end of a long night when the mind grows quiet and the need to understand everything fades away. The story does not end with a loud event. It ends with a reminder that the world is older than fear, older than confusion, older than the mistakes people make again and again, and that the balance of the world, the same balance the watchers forgot, the same balance Enoch saw in the heavens, is still there, moving slowly, the way it always has. In the final reflections of the Book of Enoch, the writing becomes softer than at any point before, as if the purpose of the story is no longer to show something new, but to let everything that has already been seen slowly settle into place. The watchers, the journeys through the heavens, the visions of the past and the future, the cycles of the world, all of them begin to feel less like separate stories and more like parts of the same long pattern. Enoch writes as someone who has returned from a place very far away, trying to explain what he learned, even though he knows that words can only describe part of it. He says that the first thing he understood after the visions ended was how small one lifetime really is. While he was being shown the movements of the stars and the passing of ages, he realized that human lives move very quickly compared to the world itself. A person can live their whole life thinking everything depends on what happens during their time, but the world has already passed through countless generations before, and it will pass through countless more after. This thought did not make him feel afraid. Instead, the book says, it made him feel calm. If the world has always continued, then it will continue again. If balance has been lost before and restored before, then it can be restored again. The story of the Watchers was not the end of the world. The flood was not the end of the world. The confusion of later generations was not the end of the world either. Each time the world changed, but the order behind it remained. Enoch writes that people often believe the world is breaking when things feel uncertain, but what they are really feeling is the movement of the cycle, the same movement that has happened many times before. When knowledge grows too fast, when power becomes more important than wisdom, when people forget the balance that keeps everything steady, the world begins to feel unstable, not because the universe is failing, but because humans have lost sight of the order they belong to. He says that the heavens never lose that order. The stars never stop following their paths. The sun never forgets the gate it rises from. The moon never forgets its rhythm. The sky continues exactly as it always has, even when the world below it feels confused. There is a passage where Enoch says that this is why the visions were shown to him again and again, not to give him power and not to make him different from everyone else, but so that someone would remember. Someone would remember that the world is not random. Someone would remember that balance exists, even when it cannot be seen. He writes that most people do not need to see the things he saw. Most people are meant to live their lives without knowing how large the world really is. But the stories were written so that, when times feel uncertain, those who hear them will remember that the world has always been larger than it looks. The book then speaks once more about the Watchers, but now they feel very far away, almost like figures in an old memory. Enoch says that their mistake was not only that they descended to earth, but that they forgot patience. They wanted to change the world quickly. They wanted to give knowledge before the world was ready for it. And because of that, the balance was broken. He says that the same mistake happens again and again in every age. People believe they must fix everything at once. They believe they must understand everything at once. They believe they must control everything at once. But the world does not move that way. The world moves slowly, the way the stars move, the way the seasons move, the way the cycle always moves. There is another quiet passage where Enoch says that after the visions, he spent many nights looking at the sky in silence. He watched the same stars he had seen from above, but now he saw them from the earth again, and he realized that nothing had changed. The sky was still steady. The order was still there. He says that this is what gave him peace. Not knowing everything, but knowing that everything did not need to be known all at once. The book then returns to the idea of the final age one last time, but it speaks about it in the simplest way yet. It says the final age will come when the world no longer needs to be corrected, when people live in balance without being forced back into it. It does not say when that will happen. It only says that the pattern will continue until the time is right. Enoch writes that no one can hurry that moment, and no one can stop it either. The world will move the way it was meant to move, the same way it always has. Near the end, the writing becomes very still, almost like the last words spoken before sleep. He says that the purpose of the story was never to frighten anyone. It was to remind them that the world is older than their fears, older than their mistakes, older than the things that seem important for a short time and then disappear. He says that the Watchers, the flood, the visions, the cycles of history, all of them are part of one long story, a story that began before anyone remembers and will continue long after. And if there is one thing the visions taught him, it is that the balance of the world is never truly gone. Sometimes it is hidden, sometimes it is forgotten, sometimes it feels very far away. But it is always there, the same way the stars are always there, even when the sky is covered by clouds. The Book of Enoch begins to come to rest here, the way a long journey ends quietly, without noise, without sudden movement, just a slow return to stillness. There are still a few final reflections left in the story, the last thoughts Enoch leaves behind about the meaning of the visions and why these strange words were carried through time for so many generations. In the last sections of the Book of Enoch, the writing becomes even more quiet and thoughtful, as if the purpose of the story is no longer to describe what was seen, but to leave behind a way of looking at the world. The visions of the heavens, the watchers, the cycles of history, and the final age all begin to feel like pieces of something larger, something that cannot be explained directly, only hinted at through stories that repeat the same ideas in different ways. Enoch says that after everything he had witnessed, he no longer felt the need to understand every detail. In the beginning of his journey, he wanted to know what the Watchers were doing, why they came to Earth, why the world lost its balance, why the future seemed uncertain. But after seeing the movements of the heavens and the passing of ages, he realized that the world does not reveal everything at once, and it was never meant to. He writes that the universe moves with patience, not with urgency. Humans feel urgency because their lives are short. They want answers quickly. They want change quickly. They want the world to make sense right away. But the order he saw in the heavens does not hurry. The stars take their time. The seasons take their time. The balance of the world returns in its own time. There is a passage where Enoch says that this is why the Watchers failed. They did not fail because they were weak. They failed because they lost patience. They wanted to step into the world before the moment was right. They wanted to give knowledge before the world was ready to carry it. And when they did, the balance shifted in ways they could not control. The book says, this lesson is not only for the Watchers, it is for every generation. When people believe they can move faster than the order of the world, they create confusion without meaning to. When they believe they understand everything, they stop paying attention to the balance around them. Enoch explains that the visions were not meant to make him feel powerful. In fact, they made him feel smaller, but in a calm way, not in a frightening way. He understood that being small inside a large world is not a bad thing. It means the world does not depend on one person, or one generation, or one moment. He writes that this realization brought him peace, the same peace he felt when he watched the stars after returning from the visions. The stars did not care about the worries of one day. They did not change because people argued or feared or forgot. They continued exactly as they always had. The book then speaks again about the record in the heavens, the place where every action becomes part of the balance of the world. Enoch says that people often think their choices disappear once they are finished, but nothing truly disappears. Everything becomes part of the pattern, the same way every step becomes part of a path, even if no one remembers who walked there first. This is not described as punishment. It is described as order. Without memory, the world would have no shape. Without shape, nothing could stay steady. The record exists because the universe remembers itself. He also speaks again about the cycles of the world, the idea that history moves in patterns, even when it looks like it is moving in a straight line. There are times when people live in balance, times when they forget, times when they learn again, and times when they must start over. Enoch says that the flood he saw in the visions was not the only time the world changed. There have been many changes, some large, some small, some noticed, some forgotten. The Watchers were part of one of those changes. The final age will be another. And between those moments, the world continues moving, the way it always has. There is a very calm passage where he says that the sky is the best reminder of this. If you look at the sky long enough, you realize that nothing there is in a hurry. The stars return to the same places. The moon returns to the same shape. The sun returns to the same path. The sky does not panic, even when the world below feels uncertain. He says that people would feel less fear if they remembered this more often. Not because the world never changes, but because change itself is part of the order. The book then returns to the final age one more time, but now it describes it in the simplest way yet. It says the final age will come when people no longer fight the balance of the world, when knowledge and wisdom move together, when power is used without forgetting the order it belongs to. It does not say that life will become perfect. It says life will become steady. And steadiness, in the language of the book, is more important than perfection. Enoch says that he does not know when that age will come, and he was not told to try to find out. He was only told to remember what he had seen, and to speak about it, so that the memory would not disappear completely. Near the end of this part, the writing becomes softer again, almost like someone speaking to a listener who is already half asleep. He says that the world has always been larger than it seems during the day, when everything feels loud and urgent. But at night, when things become quiet, it is easier to remember that the stars are still moving, the same way they always have, and the balance of the world is still there, even when no one is thinking about it. As the Book of Enoch approaches its final passages, the writing becomes quieter than ever before, as if the story itself is slowly coming to rest. The visions have already been shown. The journeys through the heavens have already been taken. The watchers have already descended and been bound. The cycles of the world have already been revealed. Now the book begins to speak in a softer voice, not about what will happen, but about what it means that these things were seen at all. Enoch says that after everything he had witnessed, he understood that the world is not meant to be fully explained. There are parts of it that can be seen, parts that can be learned, and parts that must remain hidden until the time comes when they are meant to be understood. The Watchers forgot this. They believed that knowledge should be given all at once, without waiting for the right moment. Because of that, the balance was broken, and the world became heavy with the weight of things it was not ready to carry. He writes that humans often make the same mistake, only in smaller ways. People want answers immediately. They want the future to be clear. They want the world to make sense without waiting for time to show its pattern. But the visions taught him that the order of the world is not something that can be forced. It unfolds slowly, the same way the stars move across the sky, the same way the seasons change without asking anyone's permission. There is a passage where Enoch says that after returning from the visions, he stopped trying to explain everything to everyone. He realized that not every person is meant to understand the same things at the same time. Some people hear the story and feel calm. Some hear it and feel confused. Some do not hear it at all. And that, he says, is also part of the balance. The book speaks again about the record in the heavens, the place where every action becomes part of the order of the world. Enoch says that nothing people do is ever completely lost. Even the smallest choices become part of the pattern, the same way every movement of the stars becomes part of the sky. This is not meant to make anyone feel watched or judged. It is meant to remind them that the world remembers itself, and that memory is what keeps everything from falling into chaos. He says that the Watchers forgot this as well. They believed they could change the world without becoming part of the world, but once they stepped into it, they became part of the pattern like everything else. Their actions could not be erased. They had to wait until the balance returned, the same way every disturbance in the world must eventually settle. Enoch then speaks about time again, the way he saw it from the heavens. He says that from the earth, time feels like a straight path, moving forward without stopping. But from above, it feels different. It feels like a circle, or like a wheel turning slowly, bringing the same lessons back again and again until they are finally understood. Generations forget. Generations remember. Knowledge grows. Knowledge is lost. Balance is broken. Balance returns. The pattern continues, not because the world is trapped, but because the world moves slowly and understanding takes time. There is a very calm part of the text where Enoch says that the sky is the clearest sign of this. The sky does not change its rules. The sun rises where it is meant to rise. The moon follows the same rhythm. The stars return to the same places. Even when people feel lost, the sky is still moving in order. He says that if people remembered this more often, they would not feel so certain that the world is falling apart every time something changes. Change has always been part of the pattern. Confusion has always been part of the pattern. Even forgetting has always been part of the pattern. The book then returns to the idea of the final age once more, but now it speaks about it in the most peaceful way yet. It says, the final age will not come suddenly. It will come when the world no longer needs to be corrected, when people live in balance without being forced back into it, when knowledge and wisdom move together instead of pulling apart. Enoch says he was not told when this will happen, and he was not meant to know. The beings who showed him the visions only told him that the world will continue until the moment comes naturally, the same way night turns into morning, without anyone making it happen. He writes that the purpose of the story is not to make people afraid of the future. It is to remind them that the world has always been part of something larger than any one generation can see. Near the end of this part, the writing becomes almost like a whisper. Enoch says that when the world feels loud, it helps to remember the quiet places he saw, the places where the watchers wait, the places where the stars move in perfect order, the places where time feels slow and steady. He says that those places are always there, even when people forget them. In the final reflections of the Book of Enoch, the writing becomes more peaceful than at any point before, as if the long journey through visions, warnings, and hidden knowledge is slowly settling into silence. There are no more strange places being revealed, no more watchers descending from the heavens, no more gates opening in the sky. Instead, the book speaks about understanding, about what remains after the visions are over, and about why these stories were written in the first place. Enoch says that after everything he had seen, he realized that the world does not need to be explained all at once. The desire to understand everything immediately is something that belongs to humans, not to the order of the universe. The universe moves slowly. It reveals things slowly. It corrects itself slowly. The Watchers forgot this, and because they forgot, they stepped outside the balance they were meant to keep. He writes that the greatest lesson he learned was not about the Watchers, or the flood, or the final age, but about patience. The stars do not hurry. The sun does not hurry. The moon does not hurry. Even the changes that seem sudden on Earth are part of a movement that began long before anyone noticed it. There is a passage where Enoch says that people often believe the world is becoming more chaotic than it has ever been before, but this is something every generation believes. When you live inside one moment, it feels like everything is happening for the first time. But the visions showed him that the same patterns have appeared again and again. There have always been times when knowledge grows faster than wisdom. There have always been times when people forget the balance they are part of. There have always been times when the world feels loud and uncertain. And there have always been times when the balance slowly returns. The book speaks again about the Watchers, but now they feel very distant, almost like figures in a story told long ago. Enoch says that their mistake was not only that they gave forbidden knowledge, but that they believed they understood the world completely. They believed they could change it without becoming part of its pattern. But once they stepped into the world, they were no longer outside of it. They had to follow the same order as everything else. He says that the same thing is true for humans. No one lives outside the balance of the world. Every action becomes part of it, whether people realize it or not. This is why the record he saw in the heavens exists, not to frighten anyone, but to keep the pattern from being lost. Enoch writes that the universe remembers itself, even when people forget. He then speaks again about the sky, the same way he has many times before, but now the words feel softer, almost like the end of a long conversation. He says that if you look at the sky long enough, it becomes impossible to believe that the world is completely out of control. The stars follow their paths. The moon follows its rhythm. The sun returns to the same place again and again. Nothing in the heavens seems confused, even when the earth feels that way. He says this is why the visions showed him the sky so many times. Not to impress him, not to frighten him, but to remind him that the order of the world exists whether people understand it or not. The book returns one last time to the idea of the final age, but now it describes it in the simplest way possible. The final age will come when the world no longer needs to be corrected, when people live in balance without being forced to return to it, when knowledge and wisdom move together instead of pulling apart. Enoch says that no one knows when that age will come, and no one is supposed to know. Trying to force the world to reach that moment too quickly only creates the same mistake the Watchers made long ago. The pattern must move at its own pace. There is a quiet part near the end where Enoch says that after the visions, he often sat in silence at night, watching the sky the way he did before his journey, but now with a different feeling. Before, the sky felt distant. After the visions, it felt steady, like something that had always been there, holding its place even when everything else changed. He says that this feeling stayed with him for the rest of his life, the feeling that the world is not falling apart as often as it feels like it is. It is only moving through another part of the pattern, the same way it always has. The Book of Enoch begins to feel like it is coming to its end now, the way a long story ends quietly, without noise, without sudden movement, just a slow return to stillness. Enoch says that the reason these words were written was not so that everyone would understand them, but so that they would not be forgotten completely. Even if only a few people remember, the memory is enough to keep the pattern from being lost. He says the world will continue. The stars will continue. The balance will continue, whether people notice it or not. As the Book of Enoch reaches its final pages, the tone becomes almost completely still, as if the long journey through visions, warnings, and hidden knowledge has come to a place where nothing more needs to be shown. The writing no longer speaks about distant heavens or future ages in detail. Instead, it feels like a quiet reflection, the kind that comes at the end of a long night, when the mind has stopped searching for answers and simply watches the world as it is. Enoch says that after all the things he had seen, he understood that the world was never meant to feel completely certain. Humans want the world to be simple. They want clear beginnings and clear endings. They want to know exactly when things will change, exactly when balance will return, exactly when the final age will come. But the visions showed him that the world does not move that way. The world moves slowly, the way the stars move. He writes that the Watchers failed because they believed they could step outside that slow movement. They believed they could change the world all at once, without waiting for the right time. They believed knowledge alone was enough. But knowledge without patience breaks the balance, and once the balance breaks, the world becomes heavy with confusion. Enoch says this is why the story of the Watchers was remembered for so long. Not because they were monsters, and not because they were evil in the way people imagine, but because their mistake is the same mistake that happens again and again in every generation. People become certain that they understand everything. People become certain that they can control everything. People become certain that the rules no longer apply, and each time the balance shifts and the world begins to feel unstable again. The book does not say this with anger. It says it with patience. The same patience that appears everywhere in the story. The same patience as the stars following their paths. The same patience as the seasons returning one after another. The same patience as the cycles of history repeating until they are finally understood. Enoch writes that after returning from the visions, he stopped trying to change the world around him. Instead, he tried to live in balance with it. He watched the sky often, the same way he did when he was young, but now he saw it differently. Before, the sky looked empty. After the visions, it looked ordered, steady, calm. He says that this is what gave him peace, not knowing everything, but knowing that everything does not need to be known at once. There is another passage where he speaks about the record he saw in the heavens, the place where nothing is forgotten. He says that people fear the idea that everything is remembered, but the visions showed him that memory is what keeps the world from falling apart. Without memory, there would be no pattern. Without pattern, there would be no balance. Every action becomes part of the world. Every generation becomes part of the world. Even the mistakes become part of the world. And over time, the pattern adjusts. The way a path becomes smoother, the more it is walked. The book then returns one last time to the final age, but the words are quieter than ever before. It says the final age will come when the world no longer needs to be corrected, when people no longer forget the balance they belong to, when knowledge and wisdom move together instead of pulling in different directions. It does not say that this age will come soon. It does not say that it will come far in the future. It only says that it will come when the pattern is complete. Enoch says that the beings who showed him the visions did not tell him when that moment would be, because knowing the time is not what matters. What matters is remembering that the order exists, even when it cannot be seen clearly. There is a very calm part near the end where he says that when the world feels loud, it helps to remember the quiet places he was shown, the silent places where the watchers wait, the high places where the stars move without changing, the edges of the world where the winds begin. He says those places are always there, even when people forget them. The writing becomes softer and softer, almost like the last words spoken before sleep. Enoch says that the story was written so that the memory of the balance would not disappear completely. Even if most people do not understand it, the story remains, waiting, the same way the watchers wait, the same way the stars wait, the same way the final age waits. The world continues, the heavens continue, the pattern continues, and the balance, even when it seems lost, is never truly gone. In the final words of the Book of Enoch, the story becomes almost completely silent, as if the long journey has reached the point where nothing more needs to be shown and nothing more needs to be explained. The watchers have already descended and been bound. The heavens have already been revealed. The cycles of the world have already been seen, and the final age has already been spoken of. Now the writing feels like a quiet voice at the end of the night, speaking slowly, not to teach something new, but to leave behind a feeling that will remain after the words are finished. Enoch says that after everything he was shown, he understood that the world was never meant to feel fully certain. People want the world to make sense all the time. They want to know why things happen, when things will change, and what the future will look like. But the visions taught him that the world is larger than any one moment, and because it is larger, it cannot always be understood from the inside. He writes that when people live through difficult times, it feels as if the world has never been this confused before. It feels as if something has gone wrong, that has never gone wrong in any age before. But the visions showed him that every generation feels this way when it forgets the pattern it belongs to. There have always been times when knowledge grows faster than wisdom. There have always been times when people believe they can control everything. There have always been times when the balance feels lost, And there have always been times when the balance returns again. The book speaks once more about the Watchers, but now they feel very far away, almost like shadows from the beginning of the story. Enoch says their mistake was not only that they gave forbidden knowledge, but that they believed the order of the world no longer applied to them. They believed they could act without waiting, without patience, without understanding the pattern they were part of. Because of that, they became part of the same cycle they were supposed to watch from above. He says the same thing can happen to anyone who forgets that the world moves slowly. When people try to force the world to change too quickly, they create confusion without meaning to. When they believe they know everything, they stop paying attention to the balance that keeps everything steady. Enoch writes that the visions were not given to him so that he would become powerful, or so that he would be feared, but so that someone would remember. Someone would remember that the world is not random. Someone would remember that the order of the heavens has never changed, even when the world below feels uncertain. He says that after the visions, he spent many nights looking at the sky in silence. The same stars he had seen from the heavens were still there, moving slowly along their paths. Nothing had changed. The sky was steady. The order was steady. The pattern was still there. And this, he says, is what brought him peace. Not knowing everything, not controlling everything, just knowing that the world continues the way it always has. There is a final passage where Enoch speaks about the record in the heavens one last time. He says that nothing people do is ever completely lost, but this should not make anyone afraid. The record exists so that the world can remain balanced. Every action becomes part of the pattern, and over time the pattern adjusts, the way a river slowly shapes the land without rushing. He says that even the mistakes of the Watchers became part of the pattern, and because of that, the world learned, and the balance returned. The book then returns for the last time to the final age, the age he saw in the visions. He says that this age will come when the world no longer needs to be corrected, when people live in balance without being forced back into it, when knowledge and wisdom move together the way they were always meant to. He says no one knows when that age will come, and no one needs to know. The pattern will reach that moment in its own time, the same way night becomes morning without anyone making it happen. The writing becomes very soft here, almost like the last words spoken before sleep. Enoch says that the purpose of the story was never to frighten anyone and never to make anyone feel small. It was to remind people that the world is older than their fears, older than their mistakes, older than the things that seem important for a short time and then disappear. The Watchers are still waiting, the stars are still moving, the world is still turning, the balance is still there, even when it feels hidden. And now the story reaches its final stillness, the last quiet words at the end of the Book of Enoch, where the long journey through visions, warnings, and hidden knowledge finally comes to rest. There are no more strange places to be shown, no more Watchers descending from the heavens, no more gates opening in the sky. What remains is only the meaning of everything that was seen, the feeling left behind after the visions fade, like the calm that comes just before sleep. Enoch says that after all the things he was shown, he understood that the world was never meant to feel completely clear. People want the world to make sense all the time. They want to know why things happen, why the balance is lost, why the future feels uncertain. But the visions taught him that the world is larger than any one moment, and because it is larger, it cannot always be understood from the inside. He writes that every generation believes it is living in the most confusing time that has ever existed. Every generation feels that something has gone wrong that has never gone wrong before. But the visions showed him that the same patterns have appeared again and again, long before anyone living now was here to see them. There have always been times when knowledge grows faster than wisdom. There have always been times when people believe they can control everything. There have always been times when the balance feels lost. And there have always been times when the balance slowly returns. The story of the Watchers, he says, was never only about the past. It was written so that people would remember what happens when patience is forgotten. The Watchers were powerful, but they believed power meant they no longer needed to follow the order of the world. They believed they could give knowledge without waiting for the right time. And because of that, the balance shifted, and the world became heavy with confusion. But even that was not the end. The world continued, the heavens continued, the pattern continued, and the balance returned, the same way it always does. Enoch says that this is why the visions showed him the sky so many times. The stars never leave their paths. The sun never forgets its gate. The moon never loses its rhythm. The heavens move the same way they moved long before humans were here, and they will move the same way long after. When people forget this, the world feels unstable. When people remember this, the world feels steady again. He writes that after returning from the visions, he often sat in silence at night, looking at the sky the way he did when he was young. Before the journey, the sky felt distant. After the journey, it felt calm, like something that had always been there, holding its place even when everything else changed. He says that this was the greatest thing he learned. Not how the world will end, not when the final age will come, not secrets that give power, but the understanding that the world moves slowly and the balance is never truly gone. There is one last passage where Enoch speaks about the final age, the age he saw in the visions, the age when the pattern no longer needs to repeat. He says that this age will come when people live without forgetting the order they belong to, when knowledge and wisdom move together, when the world no longer needs to be corrected again and again. He says, no one knows when that age will come, and no one is meant to know. The world will reach that moment the same way it reaches morning after night, slowly, quietly, without rushing. The book ends with a feeling of peace, not because everything has been explained, but because everything does not need to be explained. The Watchers remain in their silent place. The stars remain in their paths. The world continues to turn the way it always has, and the balance, even when it feels hidden, is still there. So as the story comes to its end, imagine the sky the way Enoch saw it, wide and steady, the stars moving slowly, the wind coming from places no one can see, the earth turning the way it always has, long before this moment and long after. Let the mind rest there for a while, in that quiet thought, the same quiet that sits behind these old stories, the same quiet that made them last for so many generations. Thank you for listening tonight. If you are still awake, write in the comments where you are listening from, and I will see you in the next journey, where we will drift into another forgotten story, another strange piece of history, another mystery that feels older than the world we see every day. Good night.